Welcome back to the 3-for-1 podcast. I am your host, Bacon, aka Nick, aka Chims. I have an unnecessary amount of nicknames. We got a really exciting episode for you guys. I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Bobbrik, aka Andy, and we are also joined by.
I'm John, aka Zemoo.
So, yeah, with
we
that,
we don't have the nicknames and such. Like we can just go, you know.
Uh, uh, no, it is really an unnecessary amount of nicknames. I can always know when someone became my friend based on what name they call me. It's pretty funny, but so this has been, as usual, an exciting week of Commander. In this instance, Magic the Gathering. In this instance, we actually mean that as a positive for once, because Wizards has recently unleashed a list of brackets and Commander power level judgment tools and cards for us to go over. This is a beta list that they're working with, where it's like tier 1 through tier 5, and then a list of game changer cards. So that it helps facilitate sort of a easier conversation. Now, if you remember when it was just me and John, we actually had a very similar episode. Y'all should check out our Commander episode, which I'm sure there's going to be a link somewhere here with our fun editing magic. Ding! But
maybe in the description, we'll see.
But this has been one of the most difficult parts of Commander, is that turn 0 conversation. We've all sat down at a table where either you or another player is just so clearly out power leveled the whole table that very few people, if anyone, have any fun with it. Like, you're like, so I built a deck that utilizes every card that has an image of a donkey on it, and this man just resolved Adnaz on turn 0, and I'm not really sure what's happening anymore. And this is meant to help address that. So, yeah. Anything to add before we really hop into this? Because I think we're gonna do a pretty good review of both the list and the game changers here.
Yeah. So our approach for this is going to be we're going to talk about sort of the list in pieces at the end, but we're going to start by just addressing the announcement itself, the framework, the different tiers, I guess we'll call them. I'm sure they have a different name for them that I'm totally eschewing, but
brackets.
Brackets
is the word.
Brackets.
Yeah.
Brought to you by the word bracket.
But yeah, we're going to talk about the brackets and our thoughts, and then we'll eventually go to the game changers themselves and go over them. So this will be broken up into multiple videos. We'll link at the end to the other videos, so watch all the other videos.
Absolutely. With the announcement, they had a couple of things that they wanted to make clear that's really necessary for knowing this. First of all, everyone that's talking about like, oh, I could easily break this system, I could easily make a tier 1 deck that functioned like a competitive EDH deck. I could too. But that's not the point of a system like this. Their first point that Wizards made with this is that, this is to help facilitate a conversation between people who actually give a damn about things like power balancing. So if you're a Spike and you enjoy just kind of running over your friends with stasis and horrific stacks pieces, and you find some loophole, yeah, they exist, and they always will exist. Commander is just such a large format that it's going to be impossible to get rid of that. The other thing is that nothing really is going to change that much. You can just play with your friends without actually digging into the system. And that can work out. If you have a way of judging this yourself, or if you're looking for alternate ways, again, check out our Commander video. That's going to be something that's good. And the last that they wanted to say before really delving into the system, and you can see this on the article on Wizards' website, is that this is a beta test. So this, for a first attempt, I personally think they did a really good job of this, especially given that it's a work in progress. So
it seems like took a stab at kind of qualifying what people have always had as kind of like a 1 to 10 scale, where you identify, as you mentioned, the turn zero conversation about any kind of rules changes or house ruling, the strength of your deck. And for a long time, people have kind of always had an elasticity towards the score of seven. There's a big joke about, like, oh, my deck's a seven. And then, as you mentioned, you turn zero, ad nauseam your opponent. And your opponent, who's got their deck of old donkeys, also thinks they've juiced up their deck, and it's also probably a seven. And so that was kind of nebulous. So this really it seems like their attempt to kind of give you a set framework to really help identify the strength of your deck so that when you're walking around the con, with your five commander decks, it'll help you hopefully find a pod that you can more easily mesh with rather than just sitting down and, having that conversation is pretty difficult to try and make sure that everyone can have fun because if there's a mismatch there, it's just brutal.
Yeah, like you're not
One way
playing
or
the
the
same
other.
game if your decks are
Yeah.
too different, too disparate in power level. It's just like I'm playing vintage and you are playing limited.
Yep. It even takes away the fun of winning those games too, because it's only really fun with your friends at least to win when everyone's having a good time. I mean, if you're going to a tournament, just win at any cost. But the point of Commander in the larger game is again to have friends that you're playing Commander with, and this will help facilitate that if you need something that's quantifiable. Um, so before we get into the brackets, I mentioned the concept of game changers, and we're going to talk about that towards the end. Game changers are cards that they have that are identified as being like extraordinarily powerful, and we'll get into those, but it's going to be mentioned in some of the brackets here. So they start off. It's bracket 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Bracket 1 is exhibition. It's an ultra casual commander deck. 2 is the core of your average current pre-constructed deck is what they say, and we're going to break these down a little bit more. 3 is upgraded, so it's beyond the strength of a pre-con deck. Like I took the pre-con and I optimized it a bit. Speaking of optimized, I call 4 optimized, where it's like I like to say it's not quite CEDH, but it's doing a very good CEDH impression. And 5 is CEDH, where it's like super high powered and it's focused on actually understanding the tournament meta and winning the mind and winning. That's the mindset they describe. So let's talk about these brackets a little bit because it's definitely worth breaking down because there is some kind of interpretation between this. First of all, each bracket has categories. So bracket 1 is exhibition. This would be the donkey deck. This would be your buddy's samurai deck. This would be like a mirror deck or something similar. I mentioned earlier on in the our other commander podcast that we did, where I had a friend who had a commander deck that was just based around the lore of the Weatherlight and like Gerard and Sisay and Karn and that original stuff. That would be really casual. They have it broken down of no mass land denial or extra turns, no 2-card infinite combos, which is an interesting thing to be specific about, no game changers at all, and only a couple of tutors. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Like, how do you feel about this as a particular format?
So I think
Yeah, go ahead, John.
so I think the main takeaway here is if core is like a precon, exhibition is worse than a precon. So like exhibition sort of like you're going out of your way to be lower powered. You're fighting with pillows instead of sticks. You're just everyone's here to have a good time. No one's getting hurt. It's gonna be slow going. It's fun. Um, and I think these like categories, I very much like the like, no mass land destruction, no combos, because that's sort of like what our episode was be like, hey, let's instead of saying 7, we should say like, hey, my deck doesn't have mass land destruction. It doesn't take extra. Like we sort of got into that, so humble brag called it, but um, uh, it's sort of like the vibe is way more important than the specific things. Like there's certainly 2-card infinite combos that you can do that are like very disruptible, very slow, very beatable. So like is sort of like seasoned to taste. It's not
Yeah.
going to be strictly adhering to this, and but it's sort of like you should know, or at least you're on the way to knowing with this framework.
Yeah, so it definitely seems like one, as you mentioned, kind of having to go out of your way to make a lower powered deck. I think it was actually Jim's when we were speaking earlier that said, there's definitely some part of the community that we often don't address as well. That is the true kitchen table returning, long-standing Magic player where they might build a commander deck from just what they have. They don't have the soul rings and all the acceleration and all of the bombs. They just have, a deck full of knights and elves and, whatever's lying around. And that's going to fall into exhibition as well without necessarily trying to power down your deck. But I think for anyone that you meet in LGS, like there's almost no way their deck's going to fall into exhibition unless you're part of that group and you know ahead of time that they have a deck where it's all donkeys. It's all the Weatherlight crew. So one definitely seems very, very tame, but it's interesting the kind of restrictions that they put on one and moving into two, they seem very similar. Um, so
Yeah,
if you kind of look at two, it still has no mass land denial. You can't chain extra turns. In one, you can't even have extra turns, but it still has no infinite combos, no game changers, and few tutors. So the actual qualities that are assigned to one and two are almost exactly the same. Um,
Yep.
aside from the fact that they announced that two is basically at the level of a precon right off the shelves.
So with that, you can expect to see a little bit more synergy, probably a little bit more thought that goes into the deck. It's like uh, uh, having like oh goodness, it's not Queen Marchesa, but it's the first Marchesa, the one that you put a plus if a creature with a +1/+1 counter dies, you get it back. Having that with like a artifact that taps to put a +1/+1 counter on it. That's like the level of synergy that I picture behind a core deck. Now, it says the average current pre-constructed deck, so there's always going to be some disparity with power levels when it comes to this type of stuff. Like, I don't know about you, but I know that like for a premium set, I expect the decks to be a lot more powerful than, let's say, like the latest energy deck out of the Too Fast Too Furious Magic set that just came out, Aether Drift. Um, so there is some discrepancies here. Now, question for you guys. This is something that I've been considering. For 1 and 2, do you think they should address board wipes? Is that something that needs to be on there? It's a common complaint that I hear amongst new players that takes away from their enjoyment. Is just, they go through the trouble of building a board state and suddenly you cast one Wrath of God and everything is gone. Do you think consistent board wipes deserve to be up here at any point or mentioned?
I
I
think
think that's difficult.
yeah, I
I
think board
mean,
wipes are a good tool to stop the person who's popping off, and you should, as a player, know to keep yourself in check if there's board wipes, and that's like part of learning the game. Should be like, oh, I was
I
winning
de-
by so much. It's unfair that you got to not let me win by so much. Like that's the point of board wipes. Is like they're only good if someone was getting out of hand.
I personally think that they should be like mentioned at least in tier 1, because if that's the level you're playing at and suddenly you're just like consistently board wiping every turn, like, let's be honest, tier 1 is just for pure enjoyment with only the cards that you have, and it doesn't seem like the type of tier where someone is going to pop off. Whereas I've seen some precons do some really gnarly things, and they include board wipes as well. So that's where I'm at with it, at least. But I do see what you mean, and I do think that if players are going to continue playing the game, they need to learn how to play around board wipes. Should they continue with that?
Yeah, maybe
Um,
consistent is the key word there, because I have a deck that's Lord Conda, though I think I might have updated it to Archangel of Avacyn. Archangel Avacyn. It's just all the white wraths that I've ever acquired in my life, and an indestructible commander.
That's hilarious.
And it's
So do
literally just there to be a troll. It's an awful deck, but it's it's not fun to play against, and I understand that.
I once
So Nick,
cast this.
do you think they
Go ahead.
should? Do you think they should include in tier one, in bracket one, just no board wipes, and not say anything about it in bracket two, but just because, like you said, in tier one, it's going to be traditional battle cruiser, like play all the zombies you want, swing out at your opponent, like you're just there to have fun. Like, should bracket one just say no board wipes outright?
I
Do
think
you
it's
think?
worth experimenting with, honestly. Like, my initial impression is yes, but there's a really valid case for allowing for board wipes in any bracket. I think that the key is that you don't want to completely stop your opponents from playing the game in one or two, but two is a little bit looser because, again, a couple board wipes is reasonable to expect in a precon if that's the standard. When it comes to one, it's ultra casual, so I would experiment with that and just see what the player base says. But if they were thinking of running like another version of the beta, if this is 2.0, if they did a 2.1, they could try that out. It'd be worth investigating in terms of like quality of life of those types of casual games. Now, I haven't played a deck that's I would consider to be casual since like 1998, but so I'm not 100% on on that particular meta environment. But again, if the point is just to have a ultra casual game of Magic where your samurais fight my donkeys, fight John's horses or Pegasus deck, then like probably board wipes would reduce the enjoyment of that. And in core 2, it's like the consistency. Like I like, are board wipes good? Absolutely. Is it fair that I resolved the same Oblivion ring 7 times in one game? Probably not. But that I think we're getting a little too nitpicky, and this is kind of hitting up against the limitations of these types of systems in a game that is as diverse as Commander is. But I would say definitely like tier 1 probably don't run board wipes, don't stop other people from playing uh, entirely.
Like you
That'd be
said,
my
there's a difference
feedback
between
for it.
casting a wrath because it's necessary and attacking with the Sun Titan that has indestructible, bringing back your O Stone, and then just laughing as everyone
And then,
struggles every turn as you do that.
yeah, that
I
game that
mean,
I
that's
did that, I
important
was not
distinction.
exaggerating. That was like a 6.5-hour game. That was nuts. But yeah.
Were you two playing together? You were in the both in the same game?
Oh no. This was
Okay, I
just
thought John was
myself
referencing
alone.
your Sun Titan.
Uh, I did make a Sun Titan indestructible. That was actually part of that plan.
Yeah.
But so it could have been. But no, that was a different game. That game lasted like 6.5 hours.
I'm usually picking up
It
Pernicious
changed me.
Steed with my Sun Titan, so I can choose to not kill my Sun Titan, but
This is the way. So next, I think is where most commander decks end up falling. Upgraded precons.
yeah, that's the most common thing I hear is how strong is your deck? I took a precon, put a few upgrades in it.
This can be devious because upgrading your energy precon is very different than updating Omo, Voice of All, or whatever the hell her name is, the one that makes the everything counters. Like, not all precons are made even. So,
Yeah. Like $100 plus precons because they're so good, like Dino one or whatever.
and
And there's
the
like
Pant Laza is pretty hilarious. Yeah.
it's like what are the original precons? And like Riku of 2 reflections. Is that still good?
So Rune of the Hidden
Neoplasm.
Realm stands up. Rune of the Hidden Realm still stands up, but Yeah, I mean, like this is a little tricky. All of these ones have no mass land denial, which I think no one is surprised or is going to bat an eye about. Armageddon is not a casual card. This one again says no chaining extra turns. It says late game 2-card infinite combos are allowed, and you can have up to 3 game changers. So I've been playing Magic for a while. What the hell is a late game 2-card combo? Anybody care to tell me what that is? Like, what does that mean?
Splinter
Who
Twin,
knows whether
modern's a
that's
turn 4
turn-
format.
Yeah, is turn 4
Like, I don't know.
late game? What was that, John?
There's certain, like I said, I was saying before, like there's certain 2-card combos that are like fine because they're slow, or like don't necessarily win outright, like Infinite Life off of Sunbond Spike Feeder or Heliod Spike Feeder.
Right.
You know, those like kind of win you the game, but there's ways around them. Those Heliod, I think you can like move counters to other things. Heliod Spike Feeder, so like
Yeah.
that probably kills some number of players at the table, but maybe not all of them. So like, is that fair? I kind of don't like those ones as much because it leaves the unfun spot of 2 people are dying and then one person just like got to stay in because they were, you know, given the indignity of being the weakest looking player alive. And it's like, you know, it's the same like reason why certain lock pieces are more infuriating. It's like I can still play, so I can't like check out of the game and just say like, oh, game's over. But like I can't actually do anything, so it's like I have to sit here for 10 turns waiting for to get through your lock, which I can do, but it's not fun to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, like Jim's had mentioned, is just like where do you define late game
Yeah.
2-card infinite combos? Like, is it turn 4? Is it turn 7? Is it based on the amount of mana that it costs? Like, if one of your cards costs 7, is that just okay? You know, it's really tough to kind of think about where your deck falls because if it's too fast with a 2-card combo, like, does it just accidentally fall into a higher bracket?
Yeah, like I guess maybe an example for this would be Jim's. Do you remember that game we played where I played Sepulchral Primordial and I got your Resto Angel? And I just got and like someone else had a sack outlet and I like just found a way between like all 4 people's graveyards to just keep looping my Primordial. Which, you know, that's kind of a 1-card combo, but I didn't put it in my deck. We all put it in all of our decks.
Yes.
I love that.
Like it was only good because y'all were, you know, popping off with your own loops and combos and flicker stuff. Like 2 people were playing flicker decks.
And John's going, that looks fun, let me try it. He just takes our cards. I think that's reasonable, but like that's literally impossible for you to account for. It's based on our deck building. Like, I feel like the guys at Wizards were looking at people playing like Turbo Nas decks and just went, okay, so people are just popping off with Thoracle Demonic Consultation on turn 1 and 2. So let's just say no early game combos, but they didn't really give us any guidance on what's late game. So I think like one of the like just even if it's like something you have to click into, just making it like providing some information on what constitutes a late game combo, what would be like the difference between a 2-card infinite in a tier 3 or a tier 4 or a tier 5, because that is going to be a point of contention, I think, between a lot of people. Like, personally, I would much rather someone just end the freaking game than like go, I have 10 million life and you know, just deal with that. Haha. I'm like, all right, cool. I guess I don't have shit to do for the next day, so let's see if we can get through this one Commander game now. So I don't know. That is like where I start to get a little confused, but it does make sense to have it be an upgraded precon. So like, I mean, it I would say like an upgraded precon, and with the game changer list, it's definitely makes sense because I could take my Mishra deck and I have upgraded it to the point where I would definitely consider it to be CEDH, but it's just an upgraded precon, guys. It's fine. But that goes back to that first point of if you want to game the system, you can. But I think that it's like incumbent on Wizards to give us a little bit more guidance on the combo pieces specifically. Like where are you trying to go with that, Commander Council? That would be dope.
I think part of this is supposed to be like your turn 0 is like, what do we consider late game in our group? What is our critical turn? And I will say to the like, number 2 being like the average precon, like the baseline, it kind of shows what I've been saying is that like WotC kind of knows that they're pushing it with the 4 commander cards they're printing. Whereas like 1 is like a magic deck, 2 is a commander deck, with those cards that say each opponent and, scale well into the late game and the big games, which they're just, printing a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, with regard to the late game 2-card combos, they do say vaguely that they shouldn't happen in the first 6 or so turns. So, like, turn 7 is when things can have, 2-card infinites, but then, Soul Ring makes that turn 5.
Is it 6 mana or turn 6?
Yeah,
I can get 6 mana on turn 3 with basically any deck that has like Soul Ring
That's what
Signet.
I'm saying is, should you only be incorporating cards that are a 2-card combo with 8+ mana cards, or should you not be firing off 2-card combos when you can? It's just really, it adds a level of vagueness to this whole system that they implemented to try and resolve that. So
I think that like if I were going to make a suggestion on how to clarify that, so having let's go with the classic Basalt Monolith Rings of Brighthearth. Having infinite colorless mana doesn't immediately win you the game on its own. You have to have a third piece in order for that to pop off. And between that and the third piece, it's interactable. So maybe not like what turn, because like you guys so very accurately pointed out, mana acceleration exists. And it even says you can have a few tutors. So if that's like your goal is to get those cards out quickly with only a few tutors, but those 2 cards will just immediately win you the game, then probably not tier 3. It's probably tier 4. I would consider that more optimized. But if you have a combo that doesn't win the game, even if it stalls, which I'm just not a fan of personally, that's my own thing, but like something that doesn't inherently immediately win without that third piece, which is interactable, maybe that's where it's tier 3 instead of tier 4. That's just my thoughts.
I'm gonna push back on this third piece thing because like this particular one is the most modular third piece, right? It's like infinite colorless mana with these 2 cards, and then this third piece is anything, anything that's a mana sink. This the 2-card combo thing's so weird because like there's tons of 3-card combos that like one of the pieces is a Blood Artist, which can be one of any 10 cards now.
Yep.
They keep printing Blood Artist duplicates or equivalents.
Yeah.
There's tons of Sam Cat Blood Artist, Sam Cat any sack outlet. There's tons of different 3 or 4 card combos where like some or all of the pieces are actually like 3 different pieces gonna say in a trench coat, but like they're replaceable by any 3 different pieces. Kind of the opposite of in a trench coat. I don't know. There's like a tag team. Doesn't matter who
Yeah.
tags in, just as long as someone shows up from that
Yep.
group. So
Like the
like those
invention
are
of the
probably
printing
more
press with
present.
replaceable parts.
Yeah. Some of those are probably more likely to show up in a 2-card combo. Like
That's fair.
maybe to the point of tutors is like tutors are that super modular piece where it's just anything. And like maybe the vibe of allowing some tutors is that they're like reactive tutors should be okay, where it's like, oh, I need a wrath or I need mana in my control deck to figure out, react to the board or now it's time to win. Like that's probably like the okay scenario for these tutors is like when they're not actually just one of the combo pieces, whichever one you're missing.
Yeah, when you tutor for the One Ring instead of the Thoracle, I guess.
Well, the idea would be like my Maga Trader to Mortals deck doesn't have like any 2-card combos, but like I really need my Urborg and Cabal Coffers to get my mana going. But then once my mana's going, I can find any number of ways to get up on cards or make people discard cards or answer the board with the Wrath or, there's an enchantment that my mono black deck can't kill, find my Mindslaver to figure out someone who can deal with it and steal it from them. So like
That's outside the box right there.
Yeah, me or my O Stone is like one of the few artifact ways to kill an enchantment. I don't know. Like the idea is like in that deck, I'm not like I don't know what I'm tutoring for. That's sort of what we got at our episode, like our first episode where we talked about this. Is like if you know how your deck's winning and it's just tutor for the win cards, that's like a total different vibe than I've got tutors to respond to the board. To, what do I need now? That's like,
right.
I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too far ahead, but that's sort of just like where I think the tutor discussion actually is about, and maybe isn't. We articulated it better.
Yeah, if you tutor for, like, an Elvish Lord, it's less painful than if you tutor for, again, a Thoracle or a Demonic Consultation or a Tainted Pact, just one of the cards that immediately wins you the game. If you tutor for the enchant removal because they have a Necropotence on board, that's less arduous and egregious, not arduous. That's less egregious than getting something else that could just immediately shut the game down and win. So it really depends on what you're tutoring for. That's always been like the conundrum of tutors in in EDH in particular. But like I
If you
think
play
you touched
Sliver
upon this pretty
Overlord, it
good.
doesn't matter how many muscle slivers you get; everyone still hates you.
Well, it only counts as one sliver, as one tutor. But yeah, I mean, like, I think they kind of explain some of the complexity behind this, and part of the reason why this is meant to facilitate a conversation rather to be the end all everything. It's going to be interesting to see people bring these to events where there's prize support, though, because they're saying like only tier 1 and tier 2 can enter this, and I'm like, great, with minimal effort I can turn Sisay without game changers into a tier 2 deck. Like that works exactly the same as it does, just like a turn slower, you know. Because it's a 4-card combo that I kill you with that, so we're good, right? Like that's fine. um so I think it's both loops, both like infinite and non-infinite loops, that is something needs to be explored when it comes to like actually handling this type of stuff. um okay, so let's talk about the next two, and these ones are vague, but it matters less when you're in this particular bit. um Optimize versus CEDH. So these are super high powered commander cards going on right there. Either way, I think it's really the mindset and the focus on the metagame that is going to be the most important part of this. So there's no restrictions on optimize. There's no restrictions on EDH. It ends up just being whether or not you have like a game plan. We do a pretty good job of identifying this and figuring this out in our commander video, because with CEDH you know exactly what your deck is going to do to win every single game. You know that you're on the Thoracle line. You know that you're on the Polymorph into Hullbreacher horror line. You know that you're on the I'm going to storm you out on turn 2 or 3 every friggin' game that I play. Here's a 2-card combo that I can get. Here's the backup 2-card combo that I can get. And I run every free counterspell and tutor that gets me into that combo and protects it. Period, end of story. This is a optimized, streamlined machine. Whereas 4s are honestly my personal favorite part of this, because it's really fun to build those. They're a little less linear, and the focus is on creating really optimal value. Like for example, I run a 3-color, the Bant Galadriel, the one that came in the art box as a commander. And she is so fun to design around. Although if you put her against a CEDH deck, I'm just not streamlined enough. Like there's a chance I could win if I slide under the table, if I slide under the radar a little bit, because I'm not playing this, and somebody just doesn't respect my deck for like a turn. You made a mistake, friend. I'm gonna teach you a valuable lesson about disrespecting the elves. But if people like take it seriously and just decide I'm going to stop you, there's very little that I can do about that. And it's sorry, I had to distract my cat from eating something. Ugh. Every time. Sorry, I need to avoid a vet bill.
Yeah, I think I have the same sort of power level with my Reki deck, where it's like I'm trying to win the game. I'm not trying to be anyone's friend. I put all the best cards that I could find, but like the most it is a non-deterministic combo until I get, super overdrive, like one or two of my combo pieces that don't have tutors, but the whole deck sort of draws a card. That's the point. It generates mana while it's doing it somehow. I've got, whatever cards I own that are on the game changers list. Like I don't spend a ton of money on commander, so like I'm definitely missing a ton of fast mana that I could be playing, and it's just never gonna get there unless I want to spend money. Like maybe I hit the lottery, I'll upgrade it, but for the most part I've spent all the money I'm spending on commander. So like that's one of my biggest holdbacks, is like I'm not ever really gonna invest into commander enough to be at that level.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest difference between 4 and 5, as Chims had mentioned, was that 5 has that really focused kind of outlook towards the metagame, whereas 4 can just be any deck once it's like fully optimized. You could take any commander and you just put in the strongest 99 you can, and it might not be equipped to rumble with the best CEDH deck, so it might not be a 5, even if it's packed with all the fast mana and all the tutors and all the interaction that you can get, because it might just not be kind of up to snuff with the current competitive meta. So you could take, Reki, for example, or Corlash is my favorite commander, and you just jam all the most powerful cards in, and you can get it to a 4. And you might lose on turn 2 every time to, an optimized CEDH Sisay. And there's not really anything that some commanders can do, no matter what the strength of the cards you put around them is, because it's not tuned for that kind of meta. So I think that's always going to be the biggest kind of demarcation between 4 and 5, is just like who's at the helm, of that deck. And it is important to mention that 4 and 5 don't have no restrictions. They do still have the ban list.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for anyone listening, yeah, there's still a ban list in place, even with the announcement of these game changers. And we'll kind of get into how those two things are going to interact with each other, but there
I
is
would
still a ban list that 4 and 5 decks have to respect.
I would argue that the Game Changers is a second ban list, but just for the formats that are bracket 1 and bracket 2.
And
Yeah.
honestly, it makes sense. Once they do a really good job of well, they do a good job of separating bracket 4 and bracket 3 from each other. So I think that it really is going to serve a good functional thing. Definitely cards that they have missed on that ban list, but we'll get into this in a minute. But
Game
I
Changers
think
list.
they did yeah, the game changer list. Sorry, definitely cards they missed with the game changers list. But I think every card that's on the list deserves to be on there.
Yeah.
um, the only thing that I think that like is really so if the point of the tier the bracket system is to enable people to have fun in a mutual understanding sort of way and to enable fun, it is the wording of mass land denial should, in my opinion, be able to incorporate resource denial. And by that I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a card that's not on the that's not on the game changer list called Lavinia of the 10th. Um, it's the 5-mana version of the Azorius Renegade Lavinia. When it comes into play, it detains non-land permanents your opponents control CMC 4 or less. That just stops your opponents from playing the game. And I think that one of the categories that they're missing in this bracket list, because I did some playtesting with some friends over the weekend, um, one of the things that they're missing with this is those types of prohibitive stacks pieces. I'm talking about your rest in peace. Like that just shuts down entire decks. And those decks are typically like at least in black, which doesn't have very much enchantment removal. Same with things like Karn, the 4-mana Karn that stops your opponents from playing artifact abilities. Collector Oof. Um, Even things like Torpor Orb, although that's a little easier to deal with in general, and Curse Totem. They just stop whole aspects of the game. They are literal game changers. And I feel like that wasn't really represented as well in this. And having played with a lot of casual players, nothing makes them more salty than those types of stacks pieces. It definitely ruins the game. Only I get to have fun. Nanner nanner boo boo, stick your head in, this stasis. Uh, and so I think that is one thing that they need to address with this type of thing explicitly, because somebody's going to be like, oh, my Trinisphere is fine. My like
Trinisphere is on the Game Changers specifically.
Oh, it is great. My Narset is fine. The one that stops you from drawing cards. My Karn is fine. It's not on the game changer list. What do you mean you're playing a whole artifact deck and now you don't get to have any fun? You're just gonna pick up your cards and leave. What do you mean Collector Oof is too good? Like that type of stuff. There's still a little bit of room for expansion and approval, and I think it's in. We described them in our old video as prohibitive stacks pieces, stuff that totally stops someone from playing at least an aspect of the game. And so they come in all shapes and sizes. Like, Teferi's Moat isn't as egregious as Stasis, but it's still just like totally stops someone from playing the game. Literally changes the game. And so that's where I think that their biggest area of expansion could be.
And maybe it's just a semantic thing where they just like needed to say, instead of mass land destruction or denial, they just like max prevention of casting spells. Which, both, all the Spear of Resistances that is sort of like a Stone Rain for every time you cast a spell will do like more damage than land destruction will to the whole table. Same as, Lavinia turning off 3-mana rocks or and all activated abilities of cheap things. It's like it's sort of like the same idea, but just worded more universally. You were saying, Andy?
I think it actually really hits home for me when Nick had mentioned Karn and Narset as two prohibitive stacks pieces, because one of my biggest qualms with both of those cards and all of the War of the Spark Planeswalkers that have the statics is, I'm going to put Karn in my deck because it's good in my deck. And if it hoses you, that's just free. Like, you just sat down with an artifact deck and you don't get to do your thing. And I might include it specifically for that, but probably not, because Karn just isn't doing anything in a deck that's not using him. But like, it's just collateral damage that says you don't get to use any of your stuff. Too bad. Nah, nah, boo boo. As you said.
So when I played Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, the 5-color one, the dope one, right? Apart from immediately winning the game, Karn was one of 2 cards that was even for my top choice, and I ran virtually no artifacts. I would just play that to stop you from tapping your mana, and then I would just shoot a Mox every turn, and let it just do that. It was definitely good enough. And the same with oh god, it was Linvala and Drala or whatever it was, the white black one that came out of the everybody team up set. I forget the name. I'm so bad at set names.
Timna the
But
Weaver?
sorry?
Timna the Weaver?
No. This
No.
was
Valandrana
Linvala.
should be from March of Machines.
Oh, I thought you were
Yes, that's
saying
the one.
partner commanders, but you mean the group ups in the. I know what you're talking
Yeah, like
about. Fifth
Multani
and
and
Borborygmos,
Yarrow
but
and yeah.
Linvala
So
and Drana, yeah.
she was the other one that I would get the second most often as just a fu to other decks. It was very brutal, and there were whole CEDH decks that just couldn't survive the Karn alone. And if a CEDH deck can't survive Karn, and you're a casual deck playing that, there should be no reason to do that. I don't mind things like Pithing Needle as much because it just hits one card, but you know, that's for the game-changing discussion. So speaking of good conversational transitions, why don't we let's take a look at this game changer list and go over it.
Hey there, thanks for watching us talk about the new Commander bracket system. We're going to talk about each color's game changers in the next couple of videos, so if you want to see them in order, just click here. But if you want to skip ahead to a different color, click here, and it'll be a playlist with all the videos in it. Once again, thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.